It's been a minute since we've gotten to study. Now, we left off with Naaman. And so I thought, since it has been a month since we met, maybe just do a very, very quick little review of the story of Naaman. So Naaman is a soldier in the army of Syria. He is a very successful man. He is a sort of a military hero, if you will. He has gained by his success, he's gained the favor of the king. But Naaman has a problem, and what's his problem? He has leprosy. And so in the course of his conquest, the Syrian army makes a raid into Israel, and they capture this young girl that becomes a slave. Now she's what we would call, I guess, a house servant or a house slave, and she serves Naaman's wife. And she says, the Israelite girl says to Naaman's wife, "Oh, I really wish that Naaman could just see the prophet in Israel, because I know if he could just see the prophet in Israel, then he could heal him." And the prophet in Israel she's talking about is who? Elisha. That's right. So Naaman's wife tells Naaman. Naaman goes and tells the king, says, "Hey, this girl we got working for us, she says if I can just get to Israel and see this prophet, he can heal me." So the king sends Naaman with his blessing to Israel to find Elisha. Now, long story short, cut to the chase, Elisha says, "Go dip in the Jordan River 7 times and you'll be healed." And at first, Naaman says, "I'm not going to do that. That's kind of silly. We got rivers in Syria I could wash in if that's all it took." And so his soldiers under him, they say, "Look, man," and I'm sure that's how they said it too, "Look, man, you got, if the prophet told you to do something hard, you'd have done that. So why not do something easy? What's it going to hurt? Give it a shot." So he does, and lo and behold, 7 times he dips in the Jordan River, he comes back clean, skinned as a baby. And so he is so thankful. He wants to give this gift this huge gift to Elisha. Elisha said, "No, I don't want your money. Keep your stuff. It's not that." He said, "Okay, well then can I have a couple of loads of dirt?" Now what does he want with the dirt? "I want to take it home. I want to make an altar out of it so I can worship the Lord," because in his pagan understanding, he's thinking that a nation's God must be worshipped on that nation's soil. So in his thinking, and we look at it and we say, well, that's kind of silly, and it was, but in his reckoning, he's thinking, I want to worship the one true God. This is the way I can do it, is taking this dirt home. So by asking for that dirt, in a way, it's sort of a statement of his faith, that I'm going to serve the one true God. Now, so that's kind of what we talked about last time. Now, this is kind of, as Paul Harvey, you remember Paul Harvey? You know who Paul Harvey is? Paul Harvey would say this is the rest of the story. So Elisha has a helper. He has an apprentice, if you will. And his apprentice name is what? Gehazi. He has an apprentice named Gehazi. And Gehazi is watching all this. And he says, wait a minute. When Naaman rides off in peace, he's thinking, wait a minute. This can't end this way. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we do, I have a brief video that I want you to watch, because this video is really sort of the theological lesson that we're supposed to get out of the story of Gehazi. All right. So when you watch this, realize that this is sort of the point of the story in a nutshell. All right. Let's watch.
that morning. It's my testimony. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hand. I'd rather have Jesus than men's applause. I'd rather be faithful to his dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to his holy name than to be the king of the vast domain, or be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today.
You know, he had a very lucrative radio contract, singing career, and that led to some excesses and temptations and vices. And his mother, his dear mother, prayed for him, and he came across that. She put that poem in front of him, and it spoke to him, and it convicted him, and he wrote the music to it, and it really changed his life around. Gehazi would be far better off to have learned and heeded the words of that song than how his life actually turned out. Can we turn the lights up a little bit? I think. There we go. Now I can see you. All right, so let's take a look at this story of Gehazi. 2 Kings chapter 6. All right. 5. Yes, 5. Well, 6 is right next to 5. I opened my Bible and it says 6. All right. 5, that's right. All right. Chapter 5, verse 20. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "Look, my master has spared Naaman this Syrian, while not receiving from his hands what he brought. But as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something from him." So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all well?" And he said, "All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Indeed, just now, 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments." All right. So we kind of back up into the story of Naaman. Naaman had originally offered a reward to Elisha, and Elisha had turned it down. Why did Elisha turn the reward down? Well, God did it. That's true. Also, what else? Hang on. What? He didn't do it to make money. And what were you going to say? He wasn't a prophet for profit. So all of those things are true. I think he doesn't want his message or his miracles to be characterized by money. He doesn't want it to be something like, I'm a hired gun kind of thing, that you can just come and give me money and get whatever you want from God. And he wanted to avoid the misconception that God's blessings can be bought. And a lot of people think that today, and part of the reason they think that is because there's a lot of preachers preaching that, especially on the television. Send me, your money and God will heal you, or God will give you, tenfold. Send me your Social Security check and God will double it, twice again, and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But Elisha doesn't want his ministry to be characterized by money, or to make someone think that God's blessings can be bought. Now, old Gehazi, he's watching all this. And when Naaman leaves, he decides he's going after Naaman, and he goes to him, and he says, hey, by the way, everything's good and all, but Elisha sent me to you and said, if you want to give us something, that'd be good. We got some company coming in. That'd be good if you want to give us, maybe some money and some changes of clothes, things like that. That'd be good if you could do that. Now, what was the motivation behind Gehazi's request? Why did he do this? I think certainly greed has to be at the forefront. Greed certainly seems to be a factor. Is that the only factor? Who was Naaman? He was a Syrian. And at this time, Syrian was what to Israel? An enemy. So, think about this. Syria has come in and they have oppressed Israel. They've taken Israelites as slaves. They have ransacked villages. They've made life miserable on the Israelites. Primarily, that has come through the Syrian army. Who works for the Syrian army? Naaman does. Naaman comes with a problem. Now, most people, even in our world, in our day, in our nation too, if our enemy were somehow to fall on hard times, most people would rejoice just a little bit. Should we do that? No. I mean, Christ teaches us to pray for our enemies, right? But let's face it, most of the world doesn't do what Jesus said do, right? So most people, and Gehazi's kind of like most people. So Naaman comes and he's got a problem, and Gehazi's kind of thinking, good for him. You reap what you sow. You get what you deserve. And lo and behold, God through Elisha heals Naaman. Man, that didn't turn out like I wanted it to. Now, who does that remind you of? Jonah, a little bit, right? Jonah wanted the Ninevites destroyed. God forgives them. So Gehazi's a little bit upset. Then Naaman wants to give some money to the ministry. And Gehazi's like, well, at least we'll get something out of this deal. But lo and behold, Elisha says, no, we don't want your money. Take it, go in peace. Take some dirt too while you're at it if you want it. That's fine, go ahead. And Gehazi says, now wait just a minute. This is to himself. Wait just a minute. This ain't right. This guy's our enemy. We did him a good turn. He can do us a good turn. And so he takes it upon himself to go out and request money from them. And so now, while his motives aren't good, but maybe understandable, if not justifiable, at least understandable, it sets about a pattern of things that are inexcusable. And one of the things that becomes inexcusable right off the bat is that he goes and he lies to Naaman. And what he says is not, I was thinking, and I thought, man, you Syrians have taken enough from us, Israelites, it'd be good if you gave us some back, so why don't you give me some money and I'll take it back and put it in the ministry coffers. That's not what he says, is it? He says, oh, Elisha sent me. Puts it off like it's Elisha's idea. Elisha sent me to say to you that we've got company coming in, and could you please just give us some money and, maybe some clothes too, that'd be good. And Naaman's all, oh, sure, I'll give you whatever you want. Now, what's going on in Gehazi's head? Now, keep in mind, Gehazi is not a unbeliever. He is not an immoral person. In the world's way of thinking, he is a prophet. He's an apprentice to Elisha, for crying out loud. He was a prophet. Before this, he's still going to be working for Elisha after it's over with. Like, this doesn't end it. But something in his mind gets messed up. And somehow or another in his mind, he's able to justify telling this lie. Now, how do you think he might justify telling this lie? Well, he does it just like people do today. Well, the end justifies the means. You hear that today? You hear that amongst politicians all the time. Well, the end justifies the means. Naaman was a pagan. He was an enemy. The money could be used to further the ministry. So quite possibly in Gehazi's mind, he's thinking, oh, well, I'll tell him a little lie, but really, in the long run, the end justifies the means. Very much like Judas. The end justifies the means, right? What did Judas say? When the flask of oil was broken and Jesus' feet was anointed, what did he say? Why this waste? All of this could have been sold and the money given to the poor. You know what John said, right? Judas didn't care about the poor. He wanted the money in there because he was a thief and he would steal it out of the money box. But he could justify it to people, and if we start justifying it to people enough, sooner or later we can justify it to ourselves. See? And that was Gehazi's thing there. All right, well, the plot is about to thicken. Any questions or comments before we read the next set of verses? Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yeah, he was more than willing to give the money. I'm not, shaking him down for it. I'm just taking what he was willing to give anyway. Sure. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Gehazi he's learned to speak the speak very well, hasn't he? For sure. All right, let's look on to the next set of verses, verse 23. So, 23. So Naaman said, please take 2 talents, and he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them on ahead of him. And when he came to the citadel, he took them from their hand and stored them away in the house. Then he let the men go, and they departed. Now, not sure how far. What does your say we're going to? It should be 24. Yeah. I did my own. My secretary is semi-retired, and I'm having to do my own typing now. So you're catching my typos. All right. Verse 24. When he came to the citadel, he took them from their hand, and stored them away in the house. Then he let the men go, and they departed. All right. So let's contrast the greed of Gehazi with the generosity of Naaman. Gehazi asked for a talent of silver each. He asked for, so please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. He asked for a talent of silver, 2 changes of clothes. And Naaman says, take 2. Let's just double it. Why? Because he was just so thankful that the Lord had healed him, man. Money didn't mean anything to him at that point. This is no small amount, by the way. And so while there's some discrepancy as exactly how much a talent of silver would have been in that day, because in different periods of history it was a different unit of measure, but most of what I read said it would be about 75 pounds. So that means what he gave him was 150 pounds of silver. Now, what exactly it would have been in that day, difficult to say. I can tell you what 150 pounds of silver is in our day, because currently silver is trading at about $80 an ounce. So you're looking at roughly the equivalent of $200,000. That's no small amount of money. It's no small amount of money what Gehazi asked for either. Give me $100,000 and 2 changes of clothes. And what does Naaman say? You're crazy. No, he says, I'll take 2. Take 2. Did Gehazi understand what he was doing was wrong? Why do you think that? He hid it. That's right. We might be able to say, well, bless his heart, he didn't really know it was wrong. But look, he hides the money before he goes in to see Elisha. If he really thought there was nothing wrong, why not just go into Elisha and say, hey, man, look, I got $200,000 here. That ought to help our ministry. But he doesn't. He hides it, right? And then Elisha says, where you been? Where you been? And what does he do? He lies, right? So, he tells a lie to cover it up to Elisha. So he understood what he's doing is wrong. Now, what does this have to say to those who would exploit ministry for personal greed? What do you think it has to say? Is there a lesson in it? You didn't hear the question? I said, what would this say to those who would exploit the ministry for their personal greed? Is there a lesson in it for it? Wouldn't recommend it, yeah. Wouldn't recommend it for sure. So I thought I would kind of do a little bit of a, I don't know the word, monologue is not the right word, but I thought I would elaborate on this just a little bit. So here's what I would say. This is my observation, and I've been in ministry a long time now. This is my observation. Contrary to what some people believe, I really don't think there are very many people who go into ministry with the idea of making money from it or taking advantage of people or getting rich from it. I'm not saying it no one ever has or ever will. I'm just saying I don't think that's the main reason why most people go into the ministry. The reason being is because you don't make that much money in ministry, especially starting out. And if your idea is just to get rich, there's a whole lot easier, quicker ways to do it. You can make a whole lot more and work a whole lot less than going in the ministry. So if your idea is, well, I'm going to get rich, you don't want to go in the ministry to do that. I mean, that's not the way to do it. That being said, I think because ministry is hard and it doesn't pay very well, especially when you're first starting out, that I think that you just reach a point where you get tired of being poor. and it opens the door for temptation to set in. Let me just kind of give you a case example with my own life, my own ministry. All right, my first church, I was 27 years old. I was going in to be the senior pastor of this church. I had 5 years of ministry prior to that experience. I had a bachelor's degree in business, and I had a master's degree in theology. And at my first church, I qualified for food stamps. My family qualified for food stamps. And so you look around, and after a year or two, you look around and you start thinking, man, I'm tired of being broke all the time. And you look around at your people, your congregation, and you look over there and you go, okay, here's a redneck Tennessee hillbilly. And you think, he's making 6 figures by growing tobacco in his backyard. And you think, now wait a minute. I'm out here working myself to death trying to get people saved, and I'm starving, and this guy's growing something that's killing people and he's getting rich. That don't seem right. That don't seem fair. And then you look over at the next pew, and here is a guy that's so ignorant that he flunked out of 7th grade. I mean, just if my daddy were telling this, he would use a little more colorful terms than I would use, but I will clean it up for the sake of the church audience. This guy would have been so ignorant that he couldn't have poured lemonade out of a pitcher with the directions on the bottom of the pitcher saying, turn up. I mean, he was that goofy. He became a millionaire. Not because he was smart or because he worked hard, but because he could play the banjo for the Grand Ole Opry. He became a millionaire. And you think, well, that ain't right. That doesn't seem fair. And so you just get tired of being poor. And so as soon as you're tired of being poor, you're in a situation where Satan wants you to be. He's got you right where he wants you to be. And that manifests its way in a variety of sins. Now, what does that look like? Well, contrary to what you might think or have been led to believe, very few preachers actually steal from the church. I'm not going to say no preacher ever does, because it happens sometimes, but very seldom does a preacher actually steal from the church. But it manifests itself in different ways. Because you're looking around and you're thinking, and you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You know, you want to try to rationalize things. And so you rationalize. And you say, well, maybe if the church had more money, they could pay me more money. Now, that ain't necessarily the truth. Just because they have more money doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pay you more money. But in your mind, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And so you think, man, if the church just had more money, they'd pay me more money. Problem solved. And so then you kind of shift gears of your ministry, and everything is about pressuring your congregation to give more money. And so everything becomes a sermon on tithing. And you'll see these guys. Every other sermon is a sermon on tithe and tithe and tithe. And we've got to push our people to tithe. Because we've got to have more money, because if we get more money, then I can get more money. Now, certainly in a preacher's repertoire, there is a space for a sermon on giving. But mark it down. These guys that every other sermon is characterized by tithing, okay, they're operating either on greed or fear or a combination of the two. It's not good. It's not what God called you to preach Jesus. He didn't call you to preach money. That's not good. Or it manifests itself in another way. You think, okay, fine. If this church isn't going to pay me a living, I'll just find one that will. And so you look around, and sure enough, you find one that'll pay you more money. So you load a U-Haul, and you head off down the road to the next church. And sure enough, they pay you more money. Still not a lot of money. You're not getting rich, but you're almost making a living now. So things are good. And you serve there a year or two. And then you get to thinking, man, it's still tight. I mean, yeah, we made more money than we did back there, but it's still tight, you know. I mean, one time we moved and we got more money. I wonder if we could move one more time and actually make a living. So you look around again and you realize, hey, there's a church that they're willing to actually pay me a living. So you load your U-Haul again and you're gone again and you're over here and now things are good and you're making money and you're actually making a living. You can actually pay the light bill and buy meat at the grocery store, right? So you do that for a couple of years. And then you start to think, it worked out pretty good a couple of times. We made a move. We loaded a U-Haul, we got more money. A couple of years later, we loaded a U-Haul and we got more money. What if we could do that again and get even more money? And so pretty soon, ministry becomes not so much following the call of God as it is selling your services to the highest bidder. And you're no better than Gehazi at that point. Or the other way it manifests itself is that you just get tired of being poor, tired of being broke, and you just leave. You just quit the ministry. Because here's the reality that I've found. The churches that pay the least are the meanest. You would think it would be the opposite. You would think they would say, well, brother, we're sorry that we can't afford to pay you much money, but what we lack in salary, we're going to make up for in love. It's not that way. What I found is the churches that love their pastor, they pay their pastor. And the churches that don't pay their pastor, they don't love him very much either. And so this poor guy, this poor young man, he's just sitting there, and he's constantly abused. His family is constantly short of funds. And after a while, he just says, I'm just tired of the abuse. I could go somewhere out in the world and I could get a job, a secular job, and I could make a whole lot more money, and I could work a whole lot less, and I wouldn't have to take medicine for my stress ulcers. So they just leave. And young men are leaving the ministry in droves right now because of this very reason. I Googled, because I wanted to make, I didn't know, I hadn't looked at any statistics, I hadn't really checked into it. So before church tonight, I just asked Google. I mean, that's what you do. If you want to know something, you ask Google, right? Hey, Google, and you ask them. So I just said, how many young men entering the ministry will actually retire from the ministry? This is what Google, it's true because Google said it, right? This is what Google said. 70 to 80% of young men who enter the ministry will drop out in the first decade. In the first decade. It went on to say that only 10%, that's 1 in 10, young men who enter the ministry actually retire from the ministry. 1 in 10. I'm the exception. I'm not the norm. So what's the solution? What's the answer? Well, I'm reminded of the passage in John's Gospel after the resurrection. Jesus appears to Peter. And he goes through this discourse with Peter. Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, well, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Well, then feed my sheep. And he goes through this 3 times. And then it says that Jesus begins to tell to Peter about how he's going to suffer for the cause of Christ. Now, Peter probably was already tired of suffering. He was going to get a lot more tired of it before it was over with. Peter looks over at John, and he says, well, what about him? And Jesus said, if I want him to live until I come back, what does that have to do with you? You follow me. And I think that's the key to understanding the whole thing. Whenever we start looking around at other people, at what they have and we don't, then jealousy, depression set in. It opens the door for things like greed. It opens the door for things like lack of perseverance, all that stuff. But really that has nothing to do with us. Whether you are called to do a ministry that you get paid for or you don't get paid for, whether you, whatever situation, whatever ministry, whatever situation in life God has called you to, be content with that. Doesn't really have anything to do. If God wants somebody to make $1 million picking the banjo, that's between them and God. It has nothing to do with you. So be content. Gehazi didn't learn this lesson, and it cost him. Questions on those verses? All right, we're going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. Verse 25. Now when he went in and stood before his master, Elisha said to him, where did you go, Gehazi? And he said, your servant did not go anywhere. Then he said to him, did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence leprous, as white as snow. So now Gehazi lies to Elisha. He's already lied to Naaman. Now he's going to lie to Elisha. What did we learn about this? Tell one lie, you got to tell another one to cover it up, right? It's just kind of a never-ending cycle. I kind of King David, when he commits adultery with Bathsheba, he tells a lie. He ends up having to commit murder to cover that lie, and he lies to everybody, but it didn't work so well trying to lie to God, and God found it out. So verse 25. Elisha says to him, where did you go, Gehazi? Did Elisha know where Gehazi went? Yeah. What story does that remind you of? Adam and Eve. Yeah, it was me too. Yeah, Adam and Eve. Yeah. Where are you, Adam? Well, God knew where Adam was, but he wanted Adam to see where he was. Elisha knew where Gehazi had been, but he wanted Gehazi to own up to what he'd done. But he doesn't do it until he's confronted with it. All right, let's see. So the leprosy becomes a symbol of each man's spiritual condition. So as Naaman, who was the pagan, finds the one true God, his leprosy is removed. But as the man who's supposed to be the man of God, he's an apprentice to the prophet Elisha, but in his sin, the leprosy clings to him. So the leprosy sort of becomes representative of sin. It sort of becomes a symbol of the sin, if you will, that as Naaman in faith came to the one true God, his sin, as the leprosy left, and as Gehazi in greed turns to sin, the leprosy comes on him. That's the idea there. And it kind of becomes an indictment of the nation of Israel as a whole. The pagan, who wasn't supposed to know the one true God, he believed and was healed physically. He was also healed spiritually. But the prophet of God's people rebelled against the one true God, as the people of Israel had done. So as we see elsewhere in the Old Testament, the God's people were being put to shame by the pagan nations. Therefore, their sin, like this leprosy of Naaman, was going to cling to Israel as it was clinging to the prophet of Israel, Gehazi. Questions on those verses? I'll give you a couple of little application questions to kind of wrap this up. Your friend is struggling to make ends meet. She lives on a very meager Social Security check. Her pastor has told her that God has instructed him that every member of the church is to give $1,000 to build an orphanage in Africa. She confides in you that it seems strange that God would want her to give money for an orphanage when she can barely afford her light bill. However, she reasons, if God's man says this is God's will, then it must be true. How do you advise her? Come to Memorial Heights. Our pastor ain't weird. Well, not like that anyway. What do you say? Exactly. Here's what I would say to her. Just because someone claims to speak for God, that doesn't make him God's man. There's a whole lot of people standing up in pulpits today claiming to speak for God. That doesn't make them God's man. I would also say this. Sometimes preachers lie. Now, God forbid that I would ever tell you anything but the truth. That's my intention, is to always be as truthful to you as I can be. And when I stand in the pulpit and I say, thus saith the Lord, it better be coming from the Bible. That's my intention. But I'm telling you, as my dear little sheep, there'll be a day when I'm not your shepherd. And you have to understand that sometimes there's wolves in sheep's clothing. There's wolves in shepherd's clothing, if you will. That you have to be a little bit wise and a little bit discerning and understand that sometimes the preacher will lie to you. And just because they're a preacher, that doesn't make them God's man, and it doesn't mean they're always telling the truth. And exactly what you said, that she should pray and give what the Lord tells her to give, not what the preacher says to give. Don't ask me what you should give. I don't know. I don't care. I don't know what you give. I don't care what you give. Give $1, give $1 million. It's all the same to me. Ask God. What He thinks you should give, that's what matters. All right. Questions on that one? All right, here's the last one. Brother Smitty. Wonder where he is. Wonder who he is. Brother Smitty has recently graduated from seminary and gotten married. 6 weeks ago, he accepted the call to serve as pastor of Middle of Nowhere Baptist Church. He and his new bride are excited to be starting their new ministry, even though the church can't afford to pay much in the way of salary. And today, Smitty receives a call from the search committee of High Muckety Muck Baptist Church, and they inform him that they want him to be their pastor. Just name his price. What should Brother Smitty do? We'll talk. Well, I'll tell you, this isn't a hypothetical thing. This happened in my life. We went to that church I told you about, got married, went there, qualified for food stamps, never filed for it, never drew it, qualified for it. About 6 weeks later, we had gone, I guess it was maybe, I got a call from my dad, because my resume at the time had my home address, which was my parents' house, listed at the contact phone number. That was before the days of cell phones. So they called my dad. My dad told me, he says, hey, I got this call from a church, and I'm not going to tell you where it is, but I'll tell you where it is. I won't tell you what church it was, but it was a church in Oklahoma City. It was an iconic church. It was a church that if I told you I were the pastor of that, you would automatically be impressed. It was that kind of church. And my dad said, yeah, this guy called me and he said that they had your resume and that they wanted to call you as their pastor. And he said, I said, well, Dad, I've already taken a church. He said, well, they told me that. He said, I told them that you had just taken a church. And he said, this guy told me, my dad said, that you tell him that we met and we want him to be our pastor, name his price, and we'll pay it. And this church had the money to do it. 1,000 things ran through my mind in the blink of an eye. But what stuck in my mind was, this is a temptation from Satan, because God called you to Westmoreland, Tennessee. He ain't called you to Oklahoma City. And unless he sets a bush on fire and says, go there, then you would be going for money. I might be able to buy a really comfortable mattress with the money they were going to pay me, but I don't think I'd sleep very well at night. So I turned it down. And I'm glad that I did. I don't know how my life would have turned out if I had taken that church. I really don't. But I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be as happy as I am now. It wouldn't be as good as I am now. And I don't know that I would feel as good about myself. Not that I feel that great about myself anyway, but I think I would feel a lot worse about myself after that. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. Questions or comments? I appreciate you being here tonight. Let's close in a word of prayer. We'll see you Sunday.